This week on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast, I'm talking about fortifying your data and protecting yourself from cybercrime. Now, today I'm talking about 3 practical steps you can take to prevent cybercrime. I've already touched on this already the last couple of days, being aware of phishing emails and text messages, how to deal with those when you suspect, and just being on your guard all the time. You want to assume an email is illegitimate, not legitimate, and take the right steps. If you think your password's been compromised, don't click on the link in the email. Go to the website and change your password that way. So if you're aware of it, if you know the steps to take, it's going to prevent a lot of the cybercrime that could happen. And then, of course, there are data breaches. Now, there are data breaches like the one that happened recently that inspired this week's episode. And I just want to touch on that briefly and kind of explain it, because you may have heard about this, but it is pretty serious. There were 2.9 billion records that were exposed and likely leaked on the dark web. It sounds like originally there was like a ransom and then it was all leaked online anyways. And this happened months ago. Yay, we're just finding out about it. According to Steve Grobman, he's the Chief Technology Officer at McAfee, this may be one of the worst data breaches ever. He said, "We know that National Public Data, which is the company who had the data breach, had a large breach earlier this year. And what really makes this one stand out is the quantity of the data. It was close to 3 billion records. That's an astounding number. If you put that in contrast to the number of people who live in the United States, there's only 330 million people living in the US. So 3 billion records related to personal information, previous places of work or residence, sensitive personal data like social security numbers is really an astounding data leak." Now, let's back up for a second, because National Public Data, my understanding is that they do background checks. So they have a huge store of data, which makes sense that your previous places of work, your address, social security number, all of that was exposed because all of that would have been accessible at National Public Data. Now, there's a lawsuit, and it'll be interesting to see how this wasn't more secure considering the type of business that they were in and how it seemingly was pretty easy for someone to hack all of that data. Steve Grobman, CTO at McAfee, he goes on to say the information that was stolen includes social security numbers, home addresses, phone numbers, and dates of birth. What makes this breach a little bit different is some of the data is also about relationships. Who are your family members? Who are the people you've worked with? And this makes consumers susceptible to all sorts of other types of attacks. Okay, so other than crawling into a hole and wanting to die because all is seemingly lost and hopeless, what can you and I actually do to help protect ourselves? Well, yesterday I talked about freezing your credit, closely monitoring your credit report and your bank account and your transactions on credit cards. That's the most important step you can take. Most of us, we can freeze our credit because we're not constantly needing to take out a car loan, get a new credit card. For most people, there's no reason, unless you're about to go buy a car or something and you're going to take a loan out. There's no reason why you need to have your credit unfrozen. And you can easily unfreeze it. Like if you know you're going to need to buy a new car, for example, you can unfreeze your credit in anticipation of that and then freeze it again after the car purchase is complete and after all the lending and everything is done. So that is probably the most important step you can take. It does appear the information has been out there for months now, so don't wait. Now, I want to talk about 3 practical steps you can take to prevent cybercrime. So knowing that it's likely that your information is out there, not just from this data breach, but before. And the more these leaks happen, the more data gets leaked and the more pieces of information get leaked about you and I, and easier it becomes over time. I really don't know what the solution is to this, because it seems like I don't know. It's like, how do you prevent someone from logging into your 401k, requesting a distribution and having the check sent to them in their name? Like, I don't know. I think that, there are safeguards in place right now, but those safeguards and what used to work is no longer working. I'm not saying that that's going to happen because there are still safeguards in place to prevent that, but like that's the kind of path that we're going down is how can we prevent people from posing as you and stealing your money? Those kinds of things are already happening. All right, so how can we do this? Well, there are certain steps you can take, and three of the biggest steps and most important steps related to passwords and phishing. I've already talked about phishing, so I'm not going to spend much time here, but never open emails, attachments, programs on your computer unless they're from a trusted source. Now, it's hard to figure this out because the emails look pretty legit. They have branding and logos, and the email address often looks legit too. And so it's hard to decipher this, but it's always unsolicited and they're always wanting you to take action. So you want to disregard requests that ask you to share your personal information, your account information. And if you do think that you need to update your password or there's been some suspicious activity, don't click on the link in the email. Go directly to that website, how you would normally log into that account, and do it that way. Make those changes that way. Okay, so then the other two relate to passwords. You want to use two-factor authentication whenever possible. That's where on a password, every time you log in, you have to enter a code. Maybe they text or email you a code. That's that additional step. So even if somebody gets access, they get your username, they get your password, if you have two-factor authentication set up, then they'd have to have your phone, for example, if you had it texted to you, they'd have to have your phone too in order to get access to that account. You want to have it set up for all of your important accounts, anything financial at all, but even things like having it set up on your Facebook account. That's important too. The other thing related to passwords is you want to use a unique password for every single login that you have. I use a password manager. There are several reputable ones out there that will store and encrypt your passwords. So all you need to remember when you use one of these is one password, your master password, and make sure it's a good one. But then once you log in, it's like a secure vault. And all hackers typically need to do is hack into one of your websites, gain access, figure out one of your passwords, Fluffy19, and then bam, they now have access to every other site you've used Fluffy19, which is probably a lot. And so a password manager will allow you to create a difficult to guess. You can have some crazy password that you would never remember because you don't have to remember it. It's stored and encrypted. So it allows you to create a secure, unique, difficult to guess password for every single login. You have different passwords for every single site. I have my passwords set up that way. It makes personal data breaches a lot less likely. So if you combine the password difficulty and the fact that your passwords don't repeat anywhere, combine that with two-factor authentication, it's going to be a lot harder for a fraudster to gain access to your account, and they're going to move on to someone who is an easier target. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Ashley Michike, and this is the Retirement Quick Tips Podcast.